Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi continues for the 20th of Sivan. We are holding in the 4th chapter of Yoma, Mishnah Vav. Continuing with differences between Yom Kippur and other days of the year. B'chol Yom, on other days, Hayu Sham Arba Ma'rachot. There were 4 pyres, 4 arrangements of fire on top of the altar, on top of the Mizbeach. V'chayom Chamesh. On Yom Kippur there were 5. They added 1 more. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's according to Rabbi Meir. The Mefarshim explained these 4 different fires are 1 for the tamid and other carbonot to be burned on top of, 1 to produce the coals to burn the ketoret that they had every day, 1 for the eish tamid to just have the mitzvah of having a fire going all the time, and 1 for burning the leftover pieces from the previous day's carbonot at night, the following night. And the 5th, an additional one for Yom Kippur Dafka, would be a separate fire to produce the super pure coals to burn the ketoret for Yom Kippur in the Kodesh Kadoshim. The Mishnah goes on. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says, B'chol Yom Shalosh. There were 3 on a normal day, V'yom Arba, and they added 1 more on Yom Kippur. The Bartner explains, according to Rabbi Yossi, you didn't need a separate pyre for the leftover limbs and fats of the previous day's offerings. You'd put that on the regular pyre with everything else. Rabbi Yehuda Omer B'chol Yom Shtayim. He says on a normal day there were only 2 fires. He eliminates the one for Eish Tamid. He says if you have any fire going on the Mizbeach that counts as Eish Tamid, you didn't need a separate Ner Tamid on top of the Mizbeach. Hayom Shalosh. But on Yom Kippur there were 3 because you would add 1 more to produce special coals for the Ketoret in the Kodesh Kadoshim. Great. On to chapter 5. Now recall in chapter 4 we said that Kohen Gadol puts down the shovel of coals that he's going to take inside for the Ketoret. So now he picks it up, and we pick up there with Mishnah Aleph in chapter Hey. Hotziu lo et kof v'et. They brought the Kohen Gadol the empty ladle. It's like a big spoon that he's going to use for Ketoret, and the shovel. So this shovel is not the one with his coals in it quite yet. This is a shovel full of Ketoris, of dakam and edaka, finely ground Ketoris. As what does he do? V'chafan melo chofnav. He scoops out his scoop, meaning his 2 hands put together. The Gemara explains how he does it. He dips his 2 hands into the shovel full of ketoret, natan letoch hakaf, and then he uses his 2 hands full to put into this ladle, which is going to carry into the temple with him. Hagodol lefi godlo, and if he's a big Kohen Gadol with big hands, then his malo hofnav is obviously bigger. His bigger hands, a koton lefi kotno. And if he's a smaller guy with smaller hands, then that's okay too. And this is the midah of Ketoris. You see, it's not an objective midah. It's however big the Kohen Gadol is, that's how much Ketoret he brings. So now that the Kohen Gadol has measured out his Ketoret size, Notel et hamachta, he takes the shovel of coals now, bimino, in his right arm, v'takaf bismalo, and the ladle with the Ketoret in his left hand, and now he's going into the heichal, into the temple. He's going through the main chamber of the temple, until he reaches in between the 2 curtains, hamavdilot ben kodesh kodashim. So this is talking about in the second temple time, there were 2 curtains, a double curtain. Ubenehen amma, and there's an amma in between these 2 curtains. Now we know this is the second temple because in the first temple there was actually a wall there called the Amma Truxlin. And it was a wall 30 amot tall, but in the second temple, the building was actually 40 amot tall. We're talking about the interior space, the ceiling height. And a wall that's 40 amot tall would have to be wider than an amma in order to reach to the ceiling and be properly supported without falling down. Actually, the Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Gimel, talks about this and asks engineering shilos about the height and the width of walls regarding this Amma Truxlin. But because at least in the second temple, you couldn't build a wall there and have it be structurally sound, so they used 2 curtains instead, with an amma in between them. Now the engineers amongst you may ask, why not just build a wall there and make it wide enough, make it wider so it will hold up, being 40 amma tall? Well, you can't really take more floor space from the Kodesh or the Kodesh Kodashim and still have the proper layout. Rabbi Yossi disagrees about the curtains. He says, there was 1 curtain there, bilvad, only, shnamar vehivdila haparochet. It will divide the curtain, lachem, for you, bein kodesh ben kodesh kadoshim, between the holy and the holy of holies. Now that pasuk is actually talking about the Mishkan. In the Mishkan there was 1 curtain, not a wall, bichlal, but in the temple, the first temple, there was a wall, 1 amma, and there is a suffix. The other sages say there's a suffix about the status of that one amma of that wall. Is that kodesh or is that kodesh kadoshim? Rabbi Yossi is saying there's no suffix. We know exactly what it is, so we know where to put that curtain. You can use one curtain instead of two. Now the Mishnah continues back to the Shita of the Chachamim, not Rabbi Yossi, Chitzona, the outer curtain, meaning the curtain to the east, farther away from the Kodesh Kadoshim, the one he reaches first, Haita Pruchva Mina Darom. It was folded back, like clipped back from the south side. So the Kohen Gadol is going to enter in between these two curtains from the south, Hapnimi, to the inner curtain, the one closer to Kodesh Kadoshim, Mina Tzfon. That was clipped back from the north. So he goes in from the south, then he walks towards the north, and then he's going to turn and enter the Kodesh Kadoshim. So Mecholech Beinehem, he walks in between them, until he reaches the north side of the building. When he reaches the north side and goes into the Kodesh Kadoshim, Hofech Ponov Ladarim, he turns his face towards the south. Mecholech Lesmolo im Haparochet Achu Magia La'aron. And so he's walking sideways, facing the Aron, until he reaches the middle of the room where the Aron is. Noten at the Mochta ben Shtei Abodim. And he puts his shovel of coals in between the poles. Now, this is interesting, this is talking about the first temple when the Aron was actually in the building. We know in Second Temple times, there's a discussion that the Aron was hidden in secret tunnels under the Temple Mount. Before the Babylonians destroyed the temple, it was hidden away. It was nignaz. There is a machlokes. Other shitas say it was actually taken away and went into Golus. Now, there's a way to reconcile this. There were actually two Aronot. There was the original Aron that Moshe made during the construction of the Mishkan, and that was the one that went out to war. And that one may indeed have been captured or exiled, whereas the main golden Aron, it seems, was Nignaz. So in this case, it's possible they're both correct because there are actually two Aronot in practice. So the Mishnah continues, Tsovar et a ketoret al gabei gecholim. He piled the incense on top of the coals, and the whole room filled up with the smoke. Now the Gemara actually explains this was a difficult avodah, because remember the shear, the midah, as the Mishnah just said, is his 2 hands full. So he has to pour 2 hands full of ketoret all at once on top of the coals. So first he has to go from the ladle, the ketoret's in the ladle that he carried in with. He has to scoop that from the ladle. He kind of uses his elbows, the Gemara explains, and gets it back into his 2 hands. And then he has to carefully put it on top of the coals, which are, of course, burning hot. So this ketoret is a very difficult practice, a difficult service. And we learned in the first parak, he would learn how to do this in the Beit of Tinas, the chamber where they would make the ketoret. They would instruct him and teach him and probably do a dry run without the hot coals about how to get this right. We can see it real quick, an interesting musar from here that you have to practice in Avodat Hashem to get it right. Maybe it's kedai to, read the English translation of the Sidur and know exactly what you're saying. And also the midah, his midah, his measurement was not objective. It was whatever his hands could hold. So whatever your hands can hold in Torah, in mitzvot, that's what you're expected to do, to fill up your hands in this world with Torah and mitzvot. That's what Hashem wants of us, and that's what we're capable of if we practice. Good, back to the Mishnah. Yatsa, he goes out of the Kodesh Kadoshim, Balo b'derech beit knisato. He goes along the same way he came in, meaning he's backing away, facing the Aron, and then he's backing away through the curtains instead of turning his back on the Kodesh Kadoshim. Umit polel tefillah ketzar, and he davens a short tefillah b'beit chitzon, in the outer chamber. The Gemara brings this tefillah. He says if it's something like if the year is supposed to be very hot, let it be a little more mild, a little nicer, and let the authority not depart from the house of Yehuda, and please don't listen to the tefillah of the Ovrei Drochim. Meaning people who are traveling, they're on the road, and then it starts raining, and they daven to Hashem that the rain should stop. Well, Hashem shouldn't listen to them because the land actually needs the rain. It's an interesting tefillah, but he davens quickly. Lo haya marach b'tefilato. The Mishnah says he's not marich. He doesn't make it take a long time. Shlo lahavit et Yisrael. So he won't scare the Jews because they're concerned. This is a very exacting avoda, and as we mentioned in the first parak, the Tzadukim would want to do this avodah differently and often died because of it. So he doesn't want them to think that he died and be upset and be shocked. So he davens quickly, as the Gemara says, and then comes outside where everyone will see him. Yashar koach and a good Shabbos.